Senator McDougall.
I want to welcome the Taoiseach here, and I want to welcome the substance and the tone and the inclusivity of his remarks and his identification with the Occupied Territories Bill and his indication of cooperation with those of us who supported Senator Frances Black when she introduced that bill and had it passed by this House in 2017 with a majority in circumstances where the Israeli government accused those of us, including myself, Senator Ivana Bacik, as she then was, Senator David Norris, and Senator Frances Black, of being anti-Semites. I'll come back to that in a moment. But this morning, a gentleman called Bezalel Smotrich, who is the finance minister in the current Israeli government, has announced that the Israeli government intends to create a further 22 settlements in the West Bank. Now, that is creeping annexation by any standards, but it shouldn't surprise us, because this man has, over the last 10 years, clearly indicated what the agenda of his party, the extreme right in Israel, is. And the coalitions that have been formed by Benjamin Netanyahu have been voluntary coalitions in which Netanyahu has escaped prosecution for corruption by remaining the Prime Minister of Israel. And people talk about Israel being a democracy. Well, what kind of a democracy has a man like Smotrich in it? And I'll just let you in on a few things he said. In 2015, he gave an interview and he said, the Palestinian Authority is a burden. This is and he said, and Hamas is an asset. That's what he said then. That while the PA was harming Israel in international forums, Hamas's status as a terrorist organisation meant that no one will recognise it, no one will give it status at the International Criminal Court, and no one will put forth a resolution at the UN Security Council. It was a cardinal principle of the right wing in Israel that they should support Hamas to weaken the PLO arm, which was trying to edge Palestinian opinion towards a two-state solution and trying to secure international support for that. So when you look at Hamas and condemn it, as I absolutely do, and I condemn the atrocity that they unleashed on the 7th of October 2023, we have to remember that it was nurtured by people like Smotrich, who wanted it there to destroy the possibility of a two-state solution. And he bears, and so does Netanyahu, the moral blame for putting 2.2 million people under the control of a terrorist organisation, which was by no means democratic, and putting them into a pressure cooker where that group was enabled to unleash the atrocity of the 7th of October. So it has to go on the record that the Israeli government, which is there now, backed Hamas because it suited them. They didn't expect what happened on the 7th of October 2023, and I, to this day, wonder what madness infused the minds of the people who organised the atrocities that were committed that day. But it was the Israeli government which arranged that the Qatari government would finance Hamas. And it was the Israeli government who were happy that Hamas should be there and that the PLO administration at the Palestinian Authority should be reduced to impotence. So let's put that on the record. If it is a democracy, it is elected and re-elected government to pursue that policy. And there is such a thing as collective responsibility. I recognise that there are many, many good Jewish and Israeli people who completely abhor what's going on in Gaza. I recognise that. But if it is to be regarded and held up as a democratic state, let's remember what it's doing and what its elected government is doing, which is shocking. And by any standards, completely shocking. And it is saying effectively that the atrocity that is now going on in the West Bank and in Gaza is justified by virtue of the activities of Hamas, which, when it suited them, they propagated and described as an asset. I just want to say another thing, that Smotrich has said that there is no such thing as a Palestinian people. Where did these people come from? They came from the circumstances in which Israel was founded. They were isolated in two areas, Gaza and in the West Bank, the occupied West Bank, and in southern Lebanon, in refugee camps. That's where they came from. But they didn't flood in from Saudi Arabia or Jordan or anywhere else. They were people who lived in Palestine until the violence of that period. And I'm not going to look back now and say who was right and who was wrong in 1948. But what I do say is that to say there is no such thing as the Palestinian people is deeply offensive. Smotrich, in November 23, immediately after the incursion in October and the atrocity, said there are 2 million Nazis in the West Bank who hate Jews exactly as the Nazis of Hamas, ISIS in Gaza. Now, 2 million Nazis in the West Bank who hate Jews exactly as do the Nazis of Hamas, ISIS. Just think about that. That's what Smotrich, that's what their finance minister is saying, the man who's expanding their settlements today by 22, illegally and contrary to international law. And he said in May of this year, and let's just remember his words, they're just fresh out of his mouth, that Gaza will be totally destroyed. And concerning the Palestinians, they will be totally despairing, understanding that there is no hope and nothing to look for in Gaza, and will be looking for relocation to begin a new life in other places. That is what we are dealing with. And that is genocide. It is contrary to every principle of international law. Ireland has consistently backed Resolution 242 of the United Nations to the effect that Israel has a right to exist and to defend itself within its internationally recognized boundaries. We have never, ever queried that. And those of us who supported Senator Black's bill have never, ever argued that that was not the case. None of us have ever argued that that was not the case. But we are now in the position that, unfortunately, the stars are aligned so that we have in Washington President Trump, and his son-in-law was the first person, Jared Kushner, his envoy to the Arab nations, the first person to articulate the idea that you could clear everybody out and give the land to Israel to establish it as a piece of real estate. He has armed Israel. He has sent weapons to Israel. If he had any moral authority or difference in ultimate aim from his son-in-law's plan, or from Smotrich, or from Netanyahu, he could have made it very clear that all of this had to stop. But he is a paper tiger when it comes to this, and he is operating on a very, very different wavelength. Now, I just want to say in the minute that I have left, what has happened in Gaza is indefensible. What happened on the 11th of October, the 9th of October 2023, was completely barbarous. But we have to live with this truth, that one atrocity should not beget another. And the 2 million people in Gaza who are being bombed, whose homes are destroyed, all of those people are innocent people. They are the victims of circumstance. They are the people whose affairs were run by Hamas with the active encouragement of the Israeli government, because Hamas was an asset and the Palestinian Authority was a burden. And I believe, therefore, that when people talk about the rights and wrongs about what's going on, you cannot kill more than 50,000 people. You cannot kill women and children in pursuit of a dwindling number of hostages whose chances of survival are dwindling with the extent of the savagery of what's going on. You cannot justify any of this, and this will not be forgiven. And for those, the Senator mentioned the definition of anti-Semitism, which I totally agree with. But those who are defending, justifying, or equivocating on what is happening in Gaza are the agents of international anti-Semitism. None of us are. Thank you, Peter.
Good.